Ancient Egypt has been nothing short of a trove of treasure for humanity since researchers and explorers began studying it. And even today, somehow, we're still mystified by the way they lived all those years ago. Whether it was the gold tongues that we stumbled across, alien sightings that they wrote down about, or trying to find an actual cure for their hangovers, Egyptians really were just like us. So, if you'd like to know more about intriguing mysteries that we've been successfully unraveling, stick around with us to find out more. Number 15. Ancient Tully Papyrus Document. First things first, what's papyrus? Papyrus was a type of paper made from papyrus stems that were used in ancient Egypt, Rome, and Greece in the olden times. Turns out that the existence of aliens has been described in great detail in these papyrus documents that are almost 3,500 years old. According to the information, the unidentified flying object was mentioned and described as many unknown shining disks, brighter than the sun, which covered the entire sky. There's no definitive date for the first UFO sighting on Earth. Many ancient wall paintings may depict flying objects and visitors from space, and it's no mystery that Egypt is regarded as the most mysterious historical location due to its massive pyramids, origins, culture, and ancient texts. The Tully Papyrus is thought to be the first proof of ancient flying saucers or UFOs. This enigmatic text claims to be the first written account of a massive UFO encounter in ancient Egypt around 1480 BC. The ancient text describes a high-speed flying machine that lit up the Egyptian sky before disappearing into space. Egypt was at the pinnacle of its power during the 18th dynasty. Egypt was reborn with the arrival of the new kingdom, which brought with it an advanced system of appointing new officials to the regime. For the four pharaohs named Thutmose, the new dynasty was also known as the Thutmosid dynasty. The Tully Papyrus described massive UFO sightings that occurred during the reign of Thutmosis III, who ordered his scribes to record the event on papyrus after witnessing it himself. Despite being centuries old, the text first became popular in the 1930s. Alberto Tulli, director of the Vatican Museum's Egyptian section, was walking through Cairo's bazaar in 1933 when he allegedly saw a 1480 BC piece of ancient papyrus in an antique shop. He made a copy of the original and replaced the original hieratic script with hieroglyphs because the artifact was too expensive for him. Tully's copied version of ancient papyrus raised doubts about its authenticity, but it went viral among fans of ancient astronaut theorists and ufologists. Since then, the text was translated twice, once by the Italian nobleman Prince Boris de Rakowilz and once by the anthropologist R. Cedric Leonard. Number 14. The 13-foot-long Book of the Dead scroll. The Egyptian Antiquities Ministry announced the discovery of a funerary temple belonging to Queen Neret in the ancient Egyptian burial ground of Saqqara, next to the pyramid of her husband, Pharaoh Teti, who ruled Egypt from around 2323 BC to 2291 BC. The temple is made of stone and has 3 mud brick warehouses on its southeastern side that housed offerings made to the queen and her husband. There, the team of Egyptian archaeologists discovered a series of burial shafts near the pyramid containing the remains of people who lived during Egypt's 18th and 19th dynasties, according to a statement released by the ministry. A 13-foot-long papyrus containing Chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead, a manuscript used by ancient Egyptians to guide the deceased through the afterlife, is one of the most fascinating objects discovered in the burial shafts. The owner's name, Pokayef, is written on the papyrus. The same name was found on one of the wooden coffins, and 4 Shabti figurines meant to serve the deceased in the afterlife. Though scientists are currently analyzing the text, other copies of Chapter 17 include a series of questions and answers, a sort of cheat sheet for those attempting to navigate the afterlife. It remains to be seen whether the newly discovered copy of Chapter 17 follows the same question and answer format. Number 13. Details of Great Pyramid construction. A team of French and Egyptian archaeologists discovered hundreds of inscribed papyrus fragments in a cave at the ancient Red Sea port of Wadi El Jarf in 2013, the oldest ever unearthed in Egypt. Egyptologist Pierre Tallet and Gregory Marouard detailed the ancient texts they discovered in a 2014 article in the journal Near Eastern Archaeology, including a logbook from the 27th year of Pharaoh Khufu's reign that described the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The hieroglyphic letters inscribed in the logbook were written more than 4,500 years ago by Marer, a middle-ranking inspector who who detailed the construction operations for the Great Pyramid, which was nearing completion, and the work at the limestone quarries at Tura on the opposite bank of the Nile River over the course of several months. Murer's logbook, written in a 2-column daily timetable, reports on the daily lives of the construction workers and notes that the limestone blocks exhumed at Tura, which were used to cover the pyramid's exterior, were transported to the construction site by boat along the Nile River and a network of canals, a journey that took between 2 and 3 days. The inspector, who led a team of sailors, also mentioned that the Vizier Ankayef, Khufu's half-brother and chief for all the king's works, was in charge of the massive construction project. Additional logbooks detail other projects undertaken by the same sailing team in the same year, such as the construction of a harbor along the Mediterranean Sea. This is all the proof needed to ensure that aliens weren't involved in the construction of the pyramids. Number 12. The legs of Queen Nefertari. Queen Nefertari, not to be confused with Nefertiti, the powerful queen who ruled alongside her husband, King Akhenaten, in the mid-14th century BC, was Ramses II's first and favored wife during the early 19th dynasty. She contributed to Ramses' massive brood, bearing 4 sons and 4 daughters, and was a quiet force behind the throne, particularly in foreign affairs. Nefertari is thought to have died around 1250 BC, when she was 40 to 50 years old. After reigning for 25 years with her husband, Ramses II rewarded his beloved consort with a temple in Nubia's Abu Simbel and a magnificent tomb in the Valley of the Queens near Thebes. Egyptologists would rank Nefertari alongside Hatshepsut, Nefertiti, and Cleopatra as the most celebrated female rulers in ancient Egyptian history, thanks to the gorgeously colored paintings on the walls, including astonishingly lifelike depictions of the beautiful queen herself. The mummified remains discovered in the tomb of Schiaparelli in 1904 were housed at the Egyptian Museum in Turin, Italy, under the assumption that they belonged to Nefertari. However, the pair of legs, which included fragmented thigh bones, a kneecap, and a piece of the tibia, was never examined, and it was unclear whether they belonged to the famous queen. After X-rays, it was analyzed that the bones clearly belonged to the queen. The size matched, and the care that went into mummifying the legs proved that the body belonged to someone of high status, and concluded that they were Nefertari's. Number 11. Mummies with gold tongues. Archaeologists discovered 2 tombs containing the mummified remains of a man and woman who died around 2,500 years ago in the ruins of Oxirrinchus in what is now El Banasa. During the excavation, the team came across a one-of-a-kind artifact, 3 gold foil tongues. One of the tombs had never been opened, which only added to the surprise. This was very important because it was very rare to find a completely sealed tomb. Inside, Esther Pons Milalo, co-director of the archaeological mission from the University of Barcelona, found a male sarcophagus made of limestone, housed mummified remains as well as an array of items including a scarab amulet, 4 canopic jars used in the mummification process, and more than 400 pieces of faience in the form of small funerary figures made of glazed earthenware. According to Sebastian Ketley of the Daily Express, the mummy's face was also preserved, with a golden tongue still inside his mouth. They were still studying the inscriptions on the vessels, which they assumed would reveal the identity of the person. Embalmers in ancient Egypt sometimes fashioned tongues from gold foil and placed them inside the mouths of the dead to allow them to communicate with Osiris, the god of the underworld. In fact, archaeologists working in Alexandria earlier this year discovered a mummy with a similar gold tongue, dating back around 2,000 years. According to The National, the 3 gold tongues discovered in the 2 tombs date from the Roman period, which began in 30 BCE and has only been discovered at archaeological sites in Alexandria and El Banasa. Number 10. Copy of Forbidden Teachings. The oldest known copy of a text claiming to be Jesus' teachings to his brother James was discovered in an ancient Egyptian trash dump among piles of 50th century papyrus, ancient tax receipts, and wagon and donkey bills of sale. According to a statement, the manuscript is a rare Greek-language edition of an apocryphal New Testament story called the First Apocalypse of James, which was previously thought to be preserved only in the Coptic language, which was an indigenous Egyptian language evolved from hieroglyphics. According to Brent Landau, a religious studies lecturer at the University of Texas at Austin, who presented the findings alongside Jeffrey Smith, a religious studies scholar at UT Austin, at the Society of Biblical Literature annual meeting in Boston in November. The text was most likely written in the 5th or 6th century. The discovery is part of a collection of over 200,000 papyrus documents housed at Oxford University in England, which were discovered in the late 19th century in a rubbish heap in the Egyptian town of Oxyrhynchus. Earlier this summer, Smith and Landau pieced together the document from 6 different papyrus fragments in the collection. For more than 2 years, the two had been researching the Oxyrhynchus findings. Landau believes the manuscript is significant for several reasons. For one thing, he explained, it's written in Greek. Christian writings were composed in Greek, which was the earliest language, and because it was the universal language of the Roman Empire. Number 9. Ancient Greek hangover cure. Hiding a hangover in ancient Egypt would have required some effort. People in Egypt may have worn a leafy necklace instead of popping an ibuprofen for a pounding drunken headache. According to a recently translated and published papyrus written in Greek, contains a recipe for a drunken headache cure. The text revealed that the alcohol victim would have strung together leaves from a shrub called Alexandrian Kamidaphne and possibly wore the strand around his neck. Though people in the ancient world believed Alexandrian Kamidaphne could relieve headaches, it's unknown whether the cure actually worked, let alone on a drunken headache. The 1,900-year-old papyrus containing the hangover treatment was also found in Oxyrhynchus by researchers Bernard Grenfell and Arthur Hunt. The study and publication of so many papyri have been a long and slow process that has lasted a century. Volume 80 was recently published, containing studies and decipherments of approximately 30 medical papyri discovered at Oxyrhynchus, including the papyrus with the hangover treatment. This newly published volume contains the largest single collection of medical papyri ever published, according to Vivian Nutton, a professor at University College London. Medical treatments for a wide range of ailments are included in the collection, including hemorrhoids, ulcers, tooth problems, and even some fragments discussing eye surgery. Number 8. The Plague of Cyprian. This horrifying discovery occurred while the great city of Luxor was being excavated. This happened between 1997 and 2012 at a funerary site in ancient Thebes, where archaeologists were hard at work. The Plague of Cyprian was the name given to a pandemic, most likely of smallpox, which afflicted the Roman Empire from AD 250 onwards during the 3rd century crisis. According to pottery, the complex arose when the entire Roman Empire was infected by a mysterious plague that killed many people around the 3rd century AD. Turns out, between the years 250 and 266, 5,000 people were said to have died in Rome. According to Cyprian's biographer, Pontius of Carthage, this dreadful plague brought excessive destruction from a hateful disease and infiltrated every house. This discovery served as the foundation for further research into hemorrhagic fevers such as Ebola, and it made a contribution to the world's medical field. All of the aforementioned discoveries had an impact on the world and its evolution from ancient times to the present. Each of the revelations made a significant contribution to and advanced the worlds of education and science. Every day, humanity finds new ways to progress and thrive, and in some ways, we're making history right now, all thanks to the teachings stored away by ancient Egyptians. Number 7. The Land of Punt. The ancient Egyptians were well aware of the lavish goods available in Punt whenever they needed a luxurious gift for someone, even a pharaoh. A pharaoh could get all the gold, frankincense, and myrrh he wanted in this mysterious, far-flung land. You could even include a couple of baboons to round out the package. Punt, an ancient Egyptian trading partner who supplied Egyptians with valuable jewels, spices, ivory, and animals, has long been known to scientists. However, the location of this extraordinary land is frustratingly vague in hieroglyphic texts, making the search for Punt one of Egyptology's unsolved mysteries. Finally, we may be approaching a precise location. Surprisingly, the definitive evidence is not a newly discovered ancient map. Instead, it comes directly from one of Punt's baboons. Domini and his colleagues examined baboon mummies discovered in ancient Egyptian tombs and compared the strontium compositions in their bones, hair, and teeth to those found in baboons living in various parts of Africa. While some of the ancient baboons were most likely raised in captivity in Egypt, others were born in modern Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, and Yemen, areas previously identified as possible locations for the land of Punt. The ancient Egyptians first sailed to Punt around 4,500 years ago and returned only infrequently for the next 1,300 years. Egyptians could exchange grain, linen, and other goods for aromatics, hard woods, and other exotic goods that were difficult or impossible to find in Egypt. Indeed, some scholars regard the Egypt-Punt trade relationship as the birthplace of international peaceful commerce, so getting closer to its location is significant. Domini's research helps us understand the ancient trade routes that shaped political fortunes for millennia. It also emphasizes the importance of additional archaeological research in Eritrea and Somalia, which are both understudied at the moment. Who knows what answers might be discovered there? Number 6. Portraits of ancient mummies. Archaeologists have discovered ancient mummies that were buried with lifelike portraits of the deceased. The mummies were buried in a cemetery in Egypt's ancient city of Philadelphia, according to the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The city of Philadelphia was founded during the Ptolemaic period when Egypt was ruled by a dynasty of pharaohs descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals. It is located about 75 miles southwest of Cairo, in the Fayum area of Egypt. But even after the dynasty fell and the Romans took control of Egypt, Philadelphia, Greek for city of brotherly love, flourished. Archaeologists discovered 2 complete mummy portraits, as well as semi-complete and incomplete portraits, during excavations at the ancient site's necropolis, according to Bassem Gahad, director of the ancient Philadelphia Necropolis Excavation Mission. People who were buried in such a context in Philadelphia are for sure upper middle class or elite, so they could afford such expensive portraits that are identical to them. According to Gahad, the portraits were painted by artists from Alexandria, an Egyptian city on the Mediterranean coast, and prove just how similar they were to us. Number 5. An ancient temple dedicated to Zeus. Archaeologists in Egypt have discovered the remains of an ancient temple dedicated to Zeus Cassius, a deity with the characteristics of both Zeus and the weather god Cassius, according to the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The ruins were discovered at the Tel El Farama archaeological site on the Sinai Peninsula's northwestern tip. This area was known as the city and harbor of Pelusium in Greco-Roman times, which sat on the far eastern mouth of the Nile River. Pelusium was used for a variety of purposes due to its strategic location, including as a fortress during the Egyptian pharaoh's time, and artifacts dating to the Greco-Roman, Byzantine, Christian, and Islamic periods suggest it was used in a variety of ways then as well. Mustafa Waziri, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, said in a statement that the archaeological team zeroed in on the temple after excavating around the remains of 2 pink granite columns lying on the ground's surface. These columns once served as the temple's front gate, but they were destroyed during an ancient earthquake that shook the city. For decades, researchers have suspected the presence of a Zeus Cassius temple at the site. According to a 2010 paper, archaeologists determined that the granite columns were likely transported on barges via the Nile from Aswan in southern Egypt to Pelusium in the early 1900s and later in the 1990s. Furthermore, the late French Egyptologist Jean Cléda discovered Greek inscriptions at the site, indicating that a Zeus Cassius temple was built there during the Greco-Roman period. Number 4. A falcon shrine with a mysterious message. Archaeologists discovered a 1,700-year-old falcon shrine in Egypt, complete with the remains of 15 headless falcons on a pedestal, as well as a stone monument depicting 2 unknown gods. The shrine and monument were described in a paper published in the October issue of the American Journal of Archaeology. They were discovered in Berenike, an ancient Egyptian port on the Red Sea, and according to the study, an iron harpoon about 13 inches long was also discovered near the pedestal. David Frankfurter, a religion professor at Boston University, who was not involved in the excavation, claimed that the decapitation of the falcons appeared to be a live offering to the god of the shrine. Usually, a live animal would be killed to demonstrate how devoted the disciples were. Archaeologists discovered a stela or pillar in another room of the shrine with a Greek inscription that reads, "It is improper to boil a head in here." Why the falcons were decapitated, why a stela was placed in a room prohibiting the boiling of heads, and why a harpoon was placed near the falcons still remains unknown to us. Number 3. Egyptian ring featuring god of fun. Archaeologists in Egypt discovered stunning gold jewelry including a ring depicting the god of fun in a more than 3,300-year-old burial, according to the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The burial site is located in the northern part of Akhetaten, approximately 186 miles south of Cairo. The pharaoh Akhenaten built this city in an attempt to change Egypt's polytheistic religion by focusing it on the worship of Aten, the sun disk. He relocated Egypt's capital city from Thebes in modern-day Luxor to Akhetaten, a newly built desert city. Tutankhamun, Akhenaten's son, eventually undid Akhenaten's religious reforms, and the new city was abandoned not long after Akhenaten's death. The recently discovered jewelry includes 3 rings. One of them bears an engraved image of Bes, known as the god of fun. Ancient images of Bes can be found all over Egypt. The deity is depicted as a dwarf who, in addition to playing music and having fun, also protects women during childbirth, according to George Hart, an Egyptologist at the British Museum. Number 2. Mummification in ancient Egypt. It has long been assumed that the ancient Egyptians used mummification to preserve a body after death. An upcoming museum exhibition, however, suggests that this was never the case, and that the elaborate burial technique was actually used to guide the deceased toward divinity. This new understanding of mummification's intended purpose fundamentally alters much of what we all learned about mummies. Campbell Price, the museum's curator of Egypt and Sudan, explained that it was completely the opposite of what they assumed. So how did this misconception persist for so long? According to Price, the Western-led idea began with Victorian researchers who incorrectly concluded that ancient Egyptians preserved their dead in the same way that one would preserve fish. What is their reasoning? Both processes use the same ingredient, salt. The salty substance used by the ancient Egyptians, however, differed from the salt used to preserve the catch of the day. This naturally occurring mineral, which is a mixture of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, sodium chloride, and sodium sulfate, was abundant near lake beds near the Nile and served as a key ingredient in mummification. Number 1. Unknown Queen's Pyramid at Saqqara. Archaeologists discovered the pyramid of a previously unknown ancient Egyptian queen, as well as a cache of coffins, mummies, and artifacts and a network of interconnected tunnels. Archaeologists working at Saqqara, an archaeological site in Giza, about 20 miles south of Cairo, for the past 2 years, recently discovered a treasure trove of coffins and mummies that may have belonged to some of King Tut's closest generals and advisors during his reign. Archaeologists were also drawn to a nearby pyramid belonging to Teti, the first king of Egypt's 6th dynasty. Inside the coffins and tomb shafts, they even found games like Senet and Shabtis, statues of the god Tar-Sokar, and even a metal axe. In addition, researchers discovered a pyramid commemorating a previously unknown queen. Since then, they had discovered that her name was Neith, and she was never previously known from the historical record. It was very exciting to Hawass that he would literally rewrite history by adding a new queen to their records.